Hello, and thank you so much for taking the time to view our presentation on culturally responsive practices in Evergreen Public Schools. I want to begin by letting you know that all of the students pictured in this presentation are Evergreen Public School students who are the very reason for everything that we do. So our board, our school board, has been asked many times if we are teaching critical race theory to our students. And each time they have answered with, no, we don't. But the question continues to come. And so what we are going to do is take a different approach. And instead of telling you, what we are not doing, we are going to tell you what we are doing, right? And so we hope that this presentation provides you with the additional info that you are looking for. So what are we going to be talking about in this presentation? First, we're going to do some future framing, which is going to tell you about the district that we aspire to be for our students. We will then discuss why we have chosen to begin implementing culturally responsive practices. And of course, we will define and expand upon our culturally responsive practices by talking about culturally responsive teaching, culturally responsive family engagement, and culturally responsive multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS for short. So let's future frame. I would like for you to imagine with me a school district where each student realizes their fullest potential, where the conditions for rigorous, engaging, relevant learning are set and normed in every school, in every classroom, where students graduate as deep thinkers who are socially skilled and have the ability to navigate and solve complex problems in any content or context, where each student feels valued, cared for, and supported academically, socially, and emotionally, and where each student leaves their classroom or school each day with their dignity intact. This means that in all of the academic and social learning that our students are doing in school each day, that nothing and no one has made them feel like because of who they are, they don't belong. This is the Evergreen Public Schools we not only aspire to be, but we intentionally labor towards each day. And knowing that this is the future that we are working towards, we must be very aware of where we have been and where we are currently in that journey. And we must answer the call of our students for better support. And our answer is culturally responsive practice. So, why are we implementing culturally responsive practices? Well, as a means to get to that future place that I just described to you for sure, but also because our data, our student outcome data, requires it of us. And I'm going to talk to you more about that data piece in the next few slides. So when it comes to our student demographics, we have a very diverse student population, and we value that. So this pie chart shows you the racial and ethnic demographics of our student population this year. This diversity is a welcomed characteristic for our district because, as we know, in that diversity, students have the opportunity to learn and experience new things through interactions with their peers. And we are becoming increasingly more diverse. So you look here, we have a growing Hispanic or Latino population. And as you can see here, we have had an increase of about 1% in Hispanic and Latino population each year since 2015, and a similar decrease in our white and English only speaking students. And so that cultural and linguistic increase prompts us to look at our practices to be sure that we are providing more than just access for our students to ensure their success in our schools. In that diversity, our student outcome data shows us that our current way of doing things, even with the very best intent, is not serving all of our students well. To help personalize this, I want you to imagine your name or your child's name represented here in this trend data that you see. If this showed that students named, insert your child's name here, were represented by the brown line in this data, what would you hope our district is doing about that? Well, my guess is that you would hope that we are looking into that. And not only looking into that, looking into changing that, right? So I want you to keep that in mind as I show you some of our student outcomes in the next few slides. This data that you're looking at comes from our district equity audit performed on last year, and it represents the percentage of students who met the English language arts and math standards by grade band in the 2018-19 school year, so pre-COVID. What we see here is that our Black and Latino and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students are having a very different academic experience than other demographic groups. Though this is only representative of 1 year, our data has looked like this for many years. Remember this data from before that I showed you, where you inserted your child's name here? That data is actually real and it comes from our OSPI website. And the red boxes that you see here and on the previous slide indicate that our Black and Hispanic and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students are having a much less successful academic experience in our schools. And since we do not believe, nor do we teach, that any race is better or worse than the other, we must look into our systems and structures and practices that may be causing these trends so we can change them. Here we have discipline data for our middle and high school students. Again, this data tells a story that we as a district must look into. Even when we norm for things like poverty and students in special education, our outcomes still show that our Black and Brown students are experiencing exclusionary discipline practices at much higher rates. And since we know that no teacher got into this profession to harm kids or suspend kids, but because they love kids, all of them, our teachers want to improve these outcomes so that all of their students can thrive. To finish up the data conversation, let's talk about family engagement. So last year, we conducted a mini audit through Beloved Community that asked us to rate ourselves in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This was completed at each of our school sites as well. And what you see here is the district level summary of all of our schools' data. As you can see, when looking at the standard of diversity, inclusion, and equity, inclusion is our largest opportunity for growth. Also notice the areas included and how we scored in each. If you look further down, you will see that of the stakeholder groups, our parent, guardian, and community partners are where we have the most room for improvement. So behind each of these data points that I just shared with you is a living, breathing student or family. And our data shows us that the way we have been doing things is leaving out certain populations of students and families in our district. And we want to change that. If you were to ask any student or staff member in our district, they'd want to change that too, because they want to see their peers and colleagues succeed. This is why we are implementing culturally responsive practices. Now I'm going to move into telling you more about the specific culturally responsive practices that we are implementing. So the wonderful thing about culturally responsive practices is that they benefit each and every student, right? Because culturally responsive practices um, encourage us to identify and value and foster and then utilize student and family strengths and experiences and their ways of being to promote engagement and achievement and empowerment. Our culture is the lens through which we view and experience the world that we live in. And culturally responsive practices encourages us to be very aware of the many lenses that our students and their parents hold and to honor them and use them as a bridge for learning and for connection. So rather than looking at students as these empty vessels that we open up each day and pour into, or blank slates that we have to fill, we understand that students come to us with their very own knowledge and expertise and experience and culture that we can build upon and connect to. Remember, we want each student to maintain their dignity as they learn in our classrooms and engage in their school environments. And that dignity is the feeling of unconditional worth, value, and belonging for themselves and for others. And dignity is key to an effective and sustained learning environment for students. So, what would that look like in classrooms, right? So, what we call that is culturally responsive teaching. And we are using Zaretta Hammond's Ready for Rigor framework from her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. So, when you hear us referring to CRT, this is what we are talking about. We're not talking about critical race theory, but culturally responsive teaching in Zaretta Hammond's work. So Zaretta explains that culturally responsive teaching is a research-based approach to teaching that connects students' cultures, languages, and life experiences with what they learn in school. These connections create pathways in the brain to help students access and retain rigorous curriculum and develop higher level academic skills, taking them from dependent learners to independent learners. It also focuses on the assets that students bring to the classroom rather than what students can't do or don't have. It also raises the expectations for students, but also provides the scaffolds to help students reach those expectations. And it makes the learning relevant for all students. Here we have the Ready for Rigor framework from Zaretta Hammond's book. There are 4 practice areas of the Ready for Rigor framework, and those practice areas are awareness, learning partnerships, information processing, and community of learners and learning environment. I'm going to spend the next few slides talking more about each of these 4 practice areas. First, we have awareness. So awareness asks teachers to become more aware of their students as well as themselves as cultural beings and examining how that influences interactions between teacher and student as well as among students. It also asks that teachers decenter their own culture as right or most important, and to center the students' cultures in the classroom space. So, for example, in a social studies lesson, this looks like a teacher welcoming multiple perspectives as students study things like history and current events to dispel stereotypes and even prevent microaggressions occurring in the classroom. Please note that we do not teach students that they were born oppressors or victims, nor do we teach them to hate the United States as we study history. In fact, teachers do not teach students what to think, but rather how to think, meaning presenting them with information from multiple sources and perspectives and allowing them to use their own deep thinking skills to come to their own conclusions while honoring the conclusions of others. Here we have a visualization of the 3 levels of culture that we're asking teachers to be aware of and then to bridge and connect to. So there are 3 layers of culture. The first being surface culture, and these are very observable patterns, and they have a relatively low impact on trust between student and teacher. And those are things like the language we speak, the clothing we wear. Those are all, surface. The next level is the shallow culture. And these are the unspoken rules a person operates with, and these actually have a high emotional impact on trust between student and teacher. And these are things like nonverbal communication, eye contact, uh, the definition of what respect looks like in different situations, personal space. All those things are included in the shallow layer of culture. And then there's the deep layer, okay? And here is where our collective but unconscious beliefs live that kind of shape how we view and interact with the world. And these have an intense emotional impact on trust between student and teacher and among students as well. And these are things like the concept of self, my identity, who I am, the definition of family, uh, individualism versus collectivism. These are things that are in our deep culture that we are unconscious about until we're interacting in a situation where we feel emotion coming up and we're not sure why. This is something that's in our deep culture. Okay. And each of these levels of culture is an access point for teachers to understand their students better so they can teach them better. The next practice area from the Ready for Rigor framework is learning partnerships. And learning partnerships ask that teachers reimagine the student to teacher relationship as more of a partnership and to build trust with students across differences to create an academic as well as social and emotional partnership for deeper learning. So, in the Ready for Rigor framework, relationships are just as important as the content. And that allows for this care and push in the learning environment. So, we care, we show care enough for the students to put themselves out there and take risks in the academic environment. But we also push them to do things that seem hard at first in the academic environment. The next practice area is information processing. And in information processing, we ask that teachers strengthen and expand students' intellectual capacity to engage in deeper and more complex learning in social and instructional activities by giving them tools to build their higher order thinking skills based on brain science. Okay? This is what takes students from dependent learner to independent learner. And it puts them in an academic mindset because it provides them with tools to get themselves out of that learning pit, right? When they're feeling like they're not successful and they want to quit, it gives them tools to help them get out of that so they can learn something new. These are the four components of the academic mindset. And this is that dialogue that we want students having with themselves while they're in class. So saying things like, I belong to this academic community. Okay, no matter what, I belong here. Um, and I can succeed at this. Even if it's a new task and I'm a little hesitant, I can succeed at this. We also want students thinking that their ability and competence will grow with their efforts. So the more you try things, you make mistakes, that's information that you can use to get better. So the more you try or persevere, the better you get at it. And then finally, we want students to think that the work that they're doing in class is valuable to them and relevant to them. So it will place an intrinsic value on the task that students are being asked to do because they feel like it's applicable to their current selves or their future selves. And this is where we want students to live in the academic setting. The last area from the Ready for Your framework is the community of learners. So, through care and support, culturally responsive teachers create an intellectually and socially safe environment for all students where student voice and inclusivity and restorative practices are prioritized. Because we know that stressed out students can't learn. Students who feel like they don't belong can't learn. Students whose identities are put into question can't learn. And in fact, we have a results policy that speaks to socially and emotionally safe learning environments. So, teachers will help students see academic mistakes as well as negative behaviors as information for them to use in order to improve rather than mistakes or failures that they can't bounce back from. If you are interested in seeing some examples of culturally responsive teaching in action or some lessons, I have linked 3 of them here for you. Now, these are not our Evergreen Public Schools teachers because we're just beginning this work. But if you'd like to see what it could look like, here are a few examples that I encourage you to explore. Additionally, what I've put here for you is the Washington State Learning Standards in case you want to explore that. So, what are the standards that teachers are teaching to students? These are listed here, and these are from our OSPI website, and they're in detail listed out for you, as well as the year of adoption. In case you wanted to explore those more, I've listed those here for you as well. So the last 2 areas we're going to cover are culturally responsive family and community engagement, as well as culturally responsive multi-tiered systems of support. So if you can recall this data from an earlier slide, we are beginning to implement culturally responsive family and community engagement by really putting the focus on making sure that we are removing and not creating new barriers to hearing from all of our families and engaging them in ways that honor their culture, right? And this could look like many different things. We're beginning to explore that. It could look like hosting school listening sessions in Spanish, right? For our Spanish speaking families, or restructuring or having parent meetings in different modes to increase participation from parents. That could look like relaying information through a community based organization that our families are already connected to, right? Or it could look like moving our school meetings out of the schools and into the local community where our families may feel more comfortable. So these are just a few things that we are beginning to explore and consider to be more culturally responsive as we're engaging our families and community organizations. Finally, this year we will begin creating district-wide, culturally responsive, multi-tiered systems of support in both academics and behavior in partnership with Education Northwest. We have a diverse population of students, which we talked about earlier, and each of those students has a unique experience and need. Our children are multifaceted with families and experiences that they bring into the classroom, into the school with them each day. They need to be affirmed so they feel like they belong. So knowing and gathering and celebrating the many aspects of cultural wealth that our learners have and bring with them is how we create those equitable multi-tiered systems of support. So we bring in all of this knowledge and we seek this information out proactively to help us design an equitable experience for that tier one of instruction and supports. And that's what you see pictured here as the green. That's that tier one. We must provide our students with the support that honors those unique needs, and that will help them reach their fullest potential, right? So that multi-tiered systems of support, what it is a framework with a tiered infrastructure that uses data proactively to help match academic and social emotional or behavioral assessment to the support that we will provide for each student. I'd like to thank you for your time in watching our presentation. And I just want to end um, with a quote from one of our Evergreen Public Schools teachers, as well as one of our students. Because in the end, everything we do is for our students. So our first quote is from a teacher, and this teacher says, "Our students are brilliant, all of them, period. I want to be a teacher that creates a classroom environment that helps them grow that brilliance. If I am not analyzing my student data to see where I need to provide more support, I am doing them a disservice. If that data shows me that I am unintentionally underserving a particular demographic of my students, whether they be Black, Hispanic, SPED, low SES, or students who part their hair on the left side, I want to do the work to change that. It's not about me, it's about the students." And finally, a quote from one of our students. "I wish all of my teachers saw me. And not the me they think I am, but the real me. The smart and caring Latina with a huge personality, but without all the English words to express it. It's okay to see my race. It's a part of me. It's okay to hear me speak Spanish. That is a part of me too. Just don't treat me like I'm less because of either of those things. I wish the adults could get it together long enough to see that while they argue, we wait. Students wait. We wait to be seen and heard, and if we wait too long, you will lose us. I submit to you that we don't want to lose any of our students. And in order to make sure we don't do that, we will be implementing culturally responsive practices. I thank you so much again for your time. If you are interested in learning more about any of the items that were discussed here today in this presentation, let us know by clicking here or by typing into your web browser bit.ly/CRPTLE. And that will take you to a form that you can complete to let us know which areas you'd like to learn more about. Thank you so much.